in attendance. So thank you everybody for coming to this webinar brought to you by Remotely. Today's topic is about supporting Black and Brown entrepreneurs and founders. We do have a Q&A function for you to submit your questions. And I don't know when you're going to get a chance to get 3 such luminaries in one place at one time to ask such questions. Now, as to who these luminaries are, now they all 3 I know well, and they have impressive, lengthy, intimidating bios, which I urge you to go online and read. But I will briefly say that, and I'm going to go in the order you guys are on my screen, and I have no idea, that's not everybody's order. We've got James Oliver Jr. He is the founder and CEO of a company called We Montage, and this year also founded the Black ParentPreneur Foundation, which supports Black parent entrepreneurs, as the name would indicate. And we're going to talk a lot about that. Deldelp Medina is the current executive director of Black and Brown Founders, which produces the Chroma conference, which I believe is coming up. So I'm going to ask each of you to say what's the one thing you want people to go check out that you're working on. But Deldelp is a longtime entrepreneur who's worked on a lot of different companies and organizations. And Lisa Stone, who is my former co-founder of Blog Her Inc., and is now gone over to the VC side, to the investing side, and is a managing director at WestRiver Group, which is a VC firm based in Seattle, but where we're based no longer matters in these days. So again, please check out their bios to learn even more about them. But thank you so much for being here. I'm really excited to hear from all of you today. But we're going to start.
Thank you, Elisa.
We're going to start with Lisa because Lisa recently published, like this week recently, a white paper that she worked on with the blessing of her firm, which was designed to synthesize the voluminous data that is out there that validates what having a diverse set of founders on your team will do for your startup. But it went deeper than that and really looked at the whole chain of investing and founding and business outcomes to talk about the financial imperative. And so she wrote a white paper, which is lengthy, and a Forbes post, which is a more too long, didn't read, version for the rest of us. And it's all about how to use the data to validate that heterogeneous teams are the way to go. So Lisa, what prompted even starting this effort? Because we all kind of cite this data as out there, but it is kind of studies show, and never have I seen it all in one place where I could say, and these are the studies. So what even prompted this action on your part?
Well, thanks for asking, and thank you all for having me here on this august panel with 2 people I respect so much, along with my dear Elisa. So I, as some of you know, I'm like a 357-year-old entrepreneur and a newly minted VC. I joined a purposefully diverse partnership, WestRiver Group, and when I got there, they said, can you curate a paper on all the data you keep citing that diversity drives better outcomes? And what's interesting is the question really is, does limiting investment decision-making to just one gender and just one race constrain outcomes? Because actually today, many of us know this, but 80% of venture capitalists are white, 84% are male. Of the 16% who are women, 65% of us are white. I mean, we're down to double digits of Black and Latinx investors. And what's so interesting is that the voluminous data that I forced Elisa to read, thank you again, 30 different studies from the leading names in the financial services industry, from Morgan Stanley to Goldman Sachs to Credit Suisse to industry advocacy organizations, et cetera, essentially all make it extremely clear that homogeneous teams damage innovation and constrain outcomes. Homogeneity is bad for the venture business. We've all read the surveys about public companies published by McKinsey, but this is also true of this part of the marketplace. And there's a really important database of venture capital firms and decision-making since 1990 that a professor at Harvard runs, Paul Gompers. And he published an article in Harvard Business Review in 2018 saying, along every dimension measured, the more similar the investment partners, the lower their investment performance. And I can cite a million data points, but it is crystal clear, right down to everyone going to the same school is a bad idea.
I thought what was so interesting about the paper and the post, the article, was that it drew a line from, okay, it started with, yes, you want a diverse founding team, you'll get better business outcomes, but who invests in those kind of teams? Well, I guess it should be no surprise at all, more diverse investing teams. And I'm not sure that was data I even had ever cited or realized existed. I knew about founding teams, diverse founding teams, good, but diverse investing teams, drawing that line to being the ones who invest. And maybe I was a little not thinking that way because our investors were men. So it just didn't even like trigger, but that's what I found so very fascinating. So you can really draw that, connect those dots, right?
It's totally true. Diverse founding teams are essential to elevating, diverse investing teams are essential to elevating diverse founding teams. And so if you are a Black or Latinx or candidly not white male founder, it's such a great idea to go out and find the investing teams or angel groups who are 3 times more likely to invest in you if you're a female CEO, or 2 times or more likely to invest in you if you are of a shared group.
But aren't those types of investors hard to find as well?
Yes, sir. They are hard to find. And I think that you all are experts and can quote a number of organizations, but the 2 that I think are most important to be affiliated right now with and or watching and or collaborating with are certainly Black VC, which was founded in 2018, but has had an important renaissance in the wake of Mr. Floyd's murder. I also think All Raise is extremely important for women and men of color in the space.
We also have Backstage Capital, right?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Oh, yes.
And you know what? I should state clearly, James, I'm not calling out individual firms. I'm calling out industry associations where people like Backstage Capital are taking a leadership role. Thanks for that point.
Yeah, that's all good.
Yeah, I think that's how do you want, the other thing I really appreciated about what you wrote was a couple of action items for the VC industry. So, you know, to James's point, and to your point at the very beginning, if 84% are male and 80% are white, what is the action item for the VC industry that comes out of putting all this data in one place where it becomes crystal clear that you, as you point out, if you care about your fiduciary duty, this is something you have to look at and validate and take action on. So what should they be doing right now?
Oh, thanks, Elisa, because you're right. It's not just the right thing to do. It is the smart thing to do. And the returns you can accelerate with a diverse team are material. I think there are 3 things to do. The first is to start with your own house. And, I have to give it up to the founder of my firm because he made a decision that he was going to consciously diversify the partnership by gender, by race and ethnicity, by operating expertise, by function, by educational background, all those elements. So I think you have to start with your own house. The second thing is there's VC principal I've gotten to know named Alejandro Guerrero out of Act One Ventures in LA. Couple of weeks ago, he kicked off a diversity inclusion rider. Now, if you're already a diverse firm, then you already have diverse investors in your cap table. But one of the biggest challenges that has come out of the conversations that Arlen Hamilton started leading with Backstage Capital, to your point, James, and Black VC and others, and I see Deldelp nodding, is that it's almost impossible to for an emerging manager who's managing a fund smaller than one of the mega funds to get into these deals. So the diversity rider signals an intention by the person writing the term sheet to include at least one, but not limited to one, diverse investor, someone who is of a different identified gender and or different identified race than the people making the primary investment. And that's how we are going to hopefully, even beyond our own firms, bring in the talent that not only we want to diversify in our cap tables to make for a better world, but candidly bring the kind of innovation expertise that you want your founders listening to, that you want coming into your companies so that you build better products and more irresistible services. We're here to win, and diversity equals winning.
Yeah, love that. So again, if you guys have any questions for Lisa about any of this, go ahead and put them in the Q&A, and we're happy to ask them. The diversity writer idea, which is something that like Hollywood is talking about, these kind of writers. I love seeing it in the venture industry because I really think unless we make it plain and articulate how to do it, like it's easy to kind of slough it off, you know? And so, and I also love the advice, of course, to you start by looking in the mirror, you start by looking in your own house. I mean, that's, that gives you the standing, I guess, to go and ask for it from others. So I really appreciate all of that. And mostly I just appreciate, after myself for years saying, well, studies show, but never really having it all at my fingertips. It's great to have it at my fingertips. So thank you for doing the work, because that was, there's like, as you, how many different studies did you end up integrating into your, and then you have them all listed in your footnotes, right? So how many different studies did you leverage?
It ended up that there are at least 30 that I noted, and they had to be big enough and sweeping enough. And there are 42 different citations because there was some really important coverage in the media as well. I'll just copy this into the chat so people can go to the page. I think that, you know, candidly, it'll never be done. It does not cite the brilliant personal blog posts and articles and opinion editorials that so many Black, Latinx, and white VCs and founders have posted on this very issue. So all feedback welcome. We're excited to update it regularly.
Yeah, that was the last thing I think it's important and great to mention about it, is that you're committing that this is something that will be updated, will be available as a resource, and will continue to evolve. And I think the numbers will continue to evolve, and hopefully in a great direction. So that's great. And that, so I suppose that link is one we should bookmark and keep our eyes on for the update.
Can I just add that I was so excited to see that report, because I literally have bookmarks for, I think, like probably all 30 of those reports, and to see it all synthesized was beautiful. So congratulations, Lisa, to your work and for having put that work in. Another aspect of this that I think is something that I was looking at is that we also have to talk about, where do institutional investors actually get their money from? And a lot of the times that comes from, you know, labor groups, you know, folks that work for the state of California, for example, CalPERS, I'll mention in particular. It touches me because, you know, my family, I would say, like, I wouldn't be sitting in front of you if, you know, one of my family members didn't work for the state of California. And as a result of being being a CalPERS pensioner, it's made our life a lot easier. It was a choice that this family member made to make sure that they had a good paying job that was a union job. But it is that person's pension that has also been fueling Silicon Valley. And so I would find myself in this weird situation personally, where, having grown up in California, starting to understand how the VC world would work, knowing fully well that the people that I was on the other side of the table were either dismissive, discounting, or frankly rude sometimes, knowing fully well that they were getting paid by a pension fund that my family member had put in over X amount of years. And I think, like, that's the other part of it all. The other thing that I want to note is, like, you are talking about people leaving money on the table, but because enough people have made enough money, they feel empowered enough to actually act in these ways that really are discriminatory at the end of the day and don't require them to actually take on this work. And I think like that's the next step in the evolution of this work, is what are those requirements going to be? And so whether it is at a state or national level where we're saying like, hey, you have to represent the population of the folks that either are putting money into your pocket in terms of the workers, or the population of the state, or we're going to do diversity riders, whatever that policy is put in place. The reality is like, it needs to happen because people's pensions funds are like being fueled by this. And so when we have dips in the market, when we have issues in the market, the reason why so much money went into Silicon Valley was because it was considered to be a place where you could have outside gains in terms of financial growth that you couldn't get from the market in general, and that you couldn't get from real estate in the last downturn. And so this was a place that allowed Silicon Valley to kind of like grow exponentially, but also it also meant that they were creating discriminatory systems at a time when the state of California in particular and the country overall is having a huge demographic shift. And so like that, having all the data I think is hugely important, and I'm hugely grateful, but also putting together the story to me is the other part that's really helpful, because it helps to eliminate like any sort of like, but what about this? But what about this other thing? Like people always want to, but a what, but what, but I think like you handle the objections that I think most people who haven't wanted to take on this work, or who have wanted to like ignore this work, or have blatantly been like, I want nothing to do with any of this, I'm anti all of these things. And you kind of like put it out there of like, here's the reality. Here's the reality of where we are, because that's the truth, is like, if we don't invest in folks of color in particular in the next 20 years, this country is not going to do well overall, regardless of your background. And so we do need diverse teams. We do need diverse investors. We need the diversity of folks that are paying into pensions and are working for government to be recognized, because otherwise our whole economy is like stacked up shells that are just going to fall apart.
So true, Deldelp. Lisa, let me ask you.
I have a question. I'm sorry, Lisa. So essentially, we're hoping then that, I don't mean to be crass, but we're hoping that greed, because we're saying we have better outcomes, which means we make better money for the VC community, right? We're hoping that greed is going to be the catalyst to inspire changes in inherent and systemic biases then, right? Is that what we're hoping?
Greed and competitiveness.
Oh, I think.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Lisa.
No, go ahead, Elisa.
Well, I was saying greed and competitiveness, staying current, staying competitive. But the thing that I was going to ask Lisa that's related to what you both just said was that the thing that was different in your paper that I thought would trigger more of this changes, because VCs might have been making enough money for themselves all along. So what's their motivation to make a little more? But you bring up the point about fiduciary duty to limited partners in those VCs, and that it's not enough for them to make enough money for themselves, right? They have to serve their investors before themselves. The investors are these pension plans into other institutional investors. That's that to me is the seeds of where the legal argument is, and in addition to the greed argument, in addition to the ethical argument, moral argument, it all kind of, to me, it all fomented together to say this is inevitable, and this is about greed and competitiveness and doing your fiduciary duty and all those things. Am I tying those things together accurately, Lisa?
Elisa, you are, and I want to address all your questions. We have short-term pressure, medium-term pressure, and long-term pressure on the larger bucket of money that institutional investors put into VC. So let me pull back for a minute. The lifeblood of venture capital comes from college endowments, pension funds, like you described, Deldelp, insurance companies, foundations, even really large family offices. 98.7% of that money is managed by white men. Okay. So the question becomes, what does one do in order to accelerate the diversity of the people deciding where that money goes, since only at this point diverse investing teams invest in diverse founding teams. Well, a lot of these institutional investors have requirements for performance placed on asset allocation. And so the challenge is, if you're introducing new groups of investors, how do you get the kind of performance that means that they can double down or invest even more money? So there is a chicken egg problem. Emerging managers end up in a challenge because they show up without a track record. Okay, so that's where there are some other elements that can be, I think, brought to bear. And the pandemic's done us no favors, because you can see how emerging managers' portfolios could be negatively affected by what's happened in the past 6 months. Some companies have outperformed, but some have underperformed. So the pressure that we bring on the system is as follows. In the immediate short term, pension funds that are trying to drive the very best returns also have an appreciation for investors and investing teams that look like the employees whose money they are managing. City, state, regional pension funds are a great place to start. And Natalie Molina Nino wrote a great article in Fast Company called "Why is Finance So White?", where she urged people who wanted to have their money managed differently to write into their pension funds and apply pressure that way. That's medium-term pressure. The longer-term pressure can come from millennials, who are people under 30, white Americans under 30, are 3 times more likely right now to be donating on behalf of Black Lives Matter. And it turns out that the $16 trillion that are going to be inherited over the next 30 years are going to go mostly to white women, who are even more supportive of Black Lives Matter than white men. So there are all kinds of long-term leading indicators that are hopeful. In the short term, I think the very best thing that we can do is to make sure that there are diverse partnerships that are investing in the most promising, the most interesting, and the most likely to succeed new ideas in the areas where we need them the most. We think those areas are healthcare, technology, and consumer experience, because that's how you get to a post-revenue scale scenario where you can have the kind of exit that makes a huge difference and causes institutional investors to take notice. I'm sorry to boil the ocean, but you asked me to.
Yeah, I did, and that was quite an ocean boiling. Thank you. So I think, you know, we've kind of talked about the why. Why is this important? Why is it important financially, legally, ethically, morally? So now we're going to talk a little bit about the how with James and Deldelp, who are each tackling it from a different perspective. James, you have been an entrepreneur and on that entrepreneur side for years, since I've known you. But this year, you finally made what was a dream you had in the back of your head for a while come true. And at the amazing possible time. I mean, I remember when you first told me about it, and I'm like, what? It's we had just gone into lockdown, if I'm remembering correctly, and you were like, I'm going to do this thing, and I was like, okay, you go, James. So tell us a little bit about the ParentPreneur Foundation and why the pandemic actually turned out to be the trigger for you, and how that worked out just great. Much to like, I did not have the foresight to see that.
Yeah, well, I'm a little crazy. But no, in all seriousness, so the ParentPreneur Foundation is something that I wanted to do ever since 2017 when I published my book, The More You Hustle, the Luckier You Get. You can be a successful parentpreneur, which I wrote specifically to inspire the millions of parentpreneurs around the world to be the best parent and entrepreneur possible. However, after George Floyd, so I'll say I had a chance coffee encounter back in early March at the beginning of the pre-COVID lockdown, but you know, it was all in the news all the time.
Right.
And I mentioned that to someone, and at this time I was just thinking it was going to be for everybody. And they were just like, well, because I was thinking I would sell my business, take $1 million of my own money to seed the foundation. So I'm talking with them and they were just like, yo, why are you waiting? Like, do it now. And at that time I understand that within every crisis is opportunity. So I already had my mind trained. I'm looking around like, what are the opportunities? What are opportunities? And because I'm like, every day I wake up and I'm like, all right, God, just give me 2 or 3 things I could do today. Just give me some inspiration. And when I get inspiration, I go with it. I just go with it. And so when they said that to me, I was like, oh, okay, this is God speaking through them to me. And I'm like, yeah, why am I waiting? Like, yeah, do it now, right? Do it now. So, you know, I'm like head first. I'm like, I'm writing articles. I'm like, I'm doing this. I have no freaking idea how I was doing that at this point. I was like, I'm doing it, damn it. Right? So, but then, you know, George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, Ahmaud Arbery, all these insane things started happening. And as you know, I had my own Karen experience with a neighbor. Thank God she's moved. But on 2 separate occasions, she's terrorizing my girlfriend and me. And we had to call the police and get a trespass warrant against her. Thankfully, we called the police before she did because she had her phone, was threatening to call the police, right? So we got that done. But after all of that happened, you know, and then I started looking at the data. I'm looking at the Fed Reserve chart that shows the median wealth for white families and black families. And it's 10x greater for white folks than it is for black folks. And just more infuriating is you look at the well-to-do black folks at the 75th percentile, and they still ain't even at the 50th percentile for the median, you know, for the white wealth. And I'm just like, I put all that together and I was like, oh, hell no. Like, this foundation is for black people. Like, we have got to do our part to close the gap, right? Because being a parent it's rewarding, but it's hard. You know, I'm a part-time single dad of 7-year-old twins, virtual schooling them every day. I mean, half the time I get up from the table, Lisa, and go to the kitchen, I can't even remember why I got up. She's laughing, but I'm serious. Like, I'm struggling, man. And I just started therapy. I had my 2nd session yesterday, and I'm so thankful for that. But it's, you know, we have to close the gap. So being a parent is hard. Being an entrepreneur, everybody knows being an entrepreneur is hard, whatever it is. 75% of new business fail, or whatever that data point is. Everybody knows that, but you combine those two. So those two together are crazy. But then when you add the black part to that, it's just like, it's just a whole next level of like insanity. And for me, I'm saying to black people who are parents and entrepreneurs, like, I see you, I feel you, because I am that too. And like, I got you. So we started this foundation with a $50,000 seed grant from Brad Feld. And, you know, not to bore with all the details, but it's a remarkable story. I think I told it to you. I'm not going to get to all the details, but I just got an email from Brad one day because I had been chopping it up with him over email, and he was giving me the regular, foundation's hard, it's hard. And I'm like, Brad, it's hard being black, man. Stop telling me it was hard, but whatever you say, you're right. You're the man. I'm not going to argue with you. But out of the blue, after George Floyd happened, I get an email, and the subject line was simply, game for a 30-minute Zoom call. And I'm like, well, yeah, like everybody's game for a 30-minute Zoom with Brad, right? And there was no subject, no body in the email. So I emailed him back. I'm like, yeah, of course. Was there something else you wanted to say to me? Am I missing this? Because, you know, Apple Mail doesn't always play nice. But he's like, yeah, you know, what are the 2 projects that you're working on that are addressing racial injustice and inequality in the black community that I can either put my time, money, or attention to? I'm like, oh, hell yeah, right? Let's do it. So long story short, you know, we went back and forth. We co-created the operating plan for the foundation. Can you imagine that? I co-created the operating plan for the ParentPreneur Foundation with Brad Feld. And then, you know, he wired us the $50,000, but you know, on the back of that, so one of the other things, and I talked to you about this, Lisa, the other day when we talked, everybody knows that black people can't get to the money, right? We all know that. Lisa did a wonderful job making the business case for why we should do that. But the one thing I feel like is under-discussed is social capital and the lack of it for black people. And it's because, to me, if you don't have adequate social capital, you can't effectively execute your would-be brilliant ideas, right? But the most insidious aspect of the lack of social capital in my mind is if you don't have it, you can't even imagine what's possible. You can't. And I'm like, yo, listen, Black people, our children, our grandchildren, our great-grandchildren, they deserve better. Like, we have got to level up our social capital. So what am I doing to help with those things in the ParentPreneur Foundation? Just a couple weeks ago, we had a LinkedIn expert come in. I paid her to come in, and we had 3 people volunteer to let her tear their LinkedIn profiles to shreds. It was awesome. We all learned something very important about how to effectively use LinkedIn to build relationships and how to position yourself to get those opportunities, and how to and how not to try to engage with people on that platform. So that's just one thing for us to do, but I'm always looking at opportunities to do that. You know, we had Seth Godin come in and do a webinar with us about marketing. It was brilliant. I mean, Seth was just up in his attic riffing. I mean, he had, Elisa, he had these like props at the ready. He's like, oh yeah, my first book I ever wrote. Oh, here it is over here. This is the book of emojis. I sold 100,000 copies. I'm like, come on, Seth, stop playing. So
James, I want to, sorry to interrupt, but the thing I'm interested in about what you're doing is that there's a lot of advice out there. And also, I think maybe more organizations out there that are sort of assuming that you're already at the place where you have that company that you want to go fundraise for, and you want to, you know, you've sort of gotten to level, and you're saying, let's also look at the fundamentals underneath that, which is how does your network look? How are you communicating about yourself?
That's right.
And you have this focus on therapy and funding therapy for granting therapy credits. Which I think is something, like, I'm not sure anybody's really thinking about that, but to me, it seems so obvious that these are it's incredibly stressful to be an entrepreneur. It's incredibly stressful to be a parent in these times, and it's incredibly stressful to be Black in these times. Like, stress means therapy is something that would really help. So, so I just think that that's a really, the approach you've taken and going the foundation route.
It's holistic. We're not looking at, here's money, right? Because I can't raise enough money to give enough Black people the money they need for their businesses, right? So how can I, you know, we started out with a $10,000 grant. I'm expecting another $10,000 donation from another prominent tech VC. He just emailed me today. And once I get that, we're deploying it immediately for another $10,000 grant. So we don't have enough money to help everybody, but okay, like, how can we bring people in here to ease your parenting lifestyle, to put money back into your business or your personal account? How can we give you the tools to increase your revenue, right? And how can we make you a better partner, spouse, help you raise delightful children that you could send out to the world? So it's a holistic view that we're taking with these people.
Yeah. And real quick right now, where can people find you and donate or join if they are?
So if you go to ParentPreneurFoundation.org, you know, naturally we have a donation button prominently displayed there. If you're a Black parentpreneur, click on the community tab. We have this incredible, mighty network that we spun up, this community that we intentionally did not put on Facebook. That is it's just beautiful. It's marvelous. All these wonderful things going on inside this community right now. And I'm just so proud of it. We have these webinars. We've given away money to pay for therapy, which is huge because it's not just that we need therapy, Elisa. It's that there's a stigma around mental health in the Black community.
Yeah. And
we are shattering those stereotypes. And every time I get a substantial sum of money, we will pay for therapy for more people. We're using BetterHelp.com. That platform is awesome.
I also really love the fact, and then Deldelp, I really want to get to what your organizations are doing. I also really love the fact that you're a parent-focused organization founded by a man, because I know as a woman entrepreneur, women entrepreneurs get both a stigma and questions asked about being parents that are never asked of men, that never apply to men, because people make this assumption, you know, that women are the ones who are going to have to handle any kid things, which, by the way, the data shows, you know, women are more burdened. But the fact that men parents can walk through the world never being asked who's going to take care of their kids while they're building their companies. So I actually really want to just say I love the fact that you're a dad who is acknowledging how parenting puts pressure on your life along with the entrepreneurism and everything. So I appreciate all of that.
Can I make one last point before you jump to Deldelp? So thank you, first of all. Second of all, 75% of the members in our community are Black women. So that's something that really concerns me. Because to Lisa's point, diversity matters, right? Black women are killing it, right? But I know that there's some brothers out there, and I'm really, like, I've been trying to connect with some dad groups to amplify what we're doing to get more Black dadpreneurs into the group. Hasn't been going so great so far, but I'm confident eventually, we'll make a difference there.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you. So Deldelp, Black and Brown Founders, which you somewhat recently joined right after, having been on the entrepreneurial side. So tell us about this organization and why that's where you chose to go next after being, COO level executive at a variety of companies. Like, how is this your calling?
So it's interesting because it's not a linear thing. I think that much like life, like you never know where you're going to end up. So when I was head of a program at Code 2040, working with entrepreneurs, we had entrepreneurs in residence in 7 cities across the US, including San Francisco. The first entrepreneur in residence was Ania Williams, who then had a company that was a hardware tech company. So she had a necklace that became earphones and that she designed from scratch. She's an opera singer by training. And so she and I were working together. Part of that program required that all the entrepreneurs in residence do some sort of like community outreach engagement. And mind you, we're working in places like Chicago and Detroit and Minneapolis and Austin and Nashville and North Carolina, and here in San Francisco. And, she's out there fundraising. These are all Black and or Latinx folks, including Minnesota, by the way, who are out there like having tech companies. And they're all doing different things for community engagement. She decided that her community engagement was to put together an event. And the thing that we saw while I was working with her is that people kept on moving the ball in the court. Like it was the sort of thing where people would say to her, when you get to X point, then I will invest in you. And she would somehow get to X point with little to no capital, a lot of sweat equity, getting people to volunteer, getting people to like support her in different ways, exchanges, that sort of thing. Just being the things that people are asked to do as entrepreneurs, which is be, really resourceful. And she would get to there and they'd be like, well, actually, no, now we need you to get to this next level. And so the ball kept on getting moved. But because I was working within different ecosystems and really getting to know these different ecosystems across the US, I realized that all the bad practices that I had experienced and seen on Sand Hill Road, to be perfectly blunt, around sexism and racism and just dismissal and discounting of people were being exported across the US and actually across the world. These same sort of like vetting systems and sort of ideas of how a successful potential entrepreneur is going to give you that 10x exit as a VC was being thrown all over the place, and that we were seeing the same thing in other places. And so I kept on having these conversations and many conversations with her where I was like, I'm not anti-VC, but I am pro-revenue. So how do we get you to a place where you're revenue neutral at least, so that if somebody does, you don't have to be dependent on somebody writing you a check. So she put together that first event, and I just thought, okay, great. She fulfilled her requirement. She's going to go off and do her thing. We became really good friends. She then went on to, the event was very successful, and she was invited by her hometown, the city of Philadelphia, to go back. She asked me to be a keynote speaker to that event. I went. And then one thing led to another, and we did a series of events together, and we just have always worked really well together. I've always done something else on the side because, to be perfectly honest, like people weren't giving money hand over fist to do this work. Often people were very dismissive, despite the need and the talent that we had in front of you. Like I know so many talented, incredible people who are building products that people want and need, but weren't going to be meeting VC metrics. And so a lot of our work has always been around like, if you never get $1 from someone, if you don't have the ability to raise a friends and family round because your friends and your family don't have it, more importantly, you usually as the college educated or are well-positioned professional person are the friends and family to your friends and family. Like you're the one that's having to pay for like childcare for people, medical bills, people's rents, to be perfectly blunt, like bail. Like I've personally paid for family members' bail at more than once. Like these are realities that we were living, and that we saw that these people were being amazing. But if you're building tech products to meet VC standards, it's a very different way of building a company than if you're thinking, how am I revenue neutral? And so like that was the aspect of it all. And so when the shutdown happened, and as you know, I was looking for work and I was trying to figure out what was going to happen. And Nia was like, well, you know, maybe we can work on something. And we started working together again. And then she luckily, and well-deserved, got a job at Omidyar, and she asked me to come in as the executive director. And I said yes right away, because I really like working with our team. We're all working mothers. We're all women of color mothers. This situation that we're in, I don't even have the words for it, to be perfectly honest. Sometimes I'm at a loss of like how to explain it, because just this week alone, I've had to send 3 or 4 condolences cards. I found out that, you know, there's more people who've gotten sick. Like, you know, we are living moments of lots of heightened, you know, painful moments. The Breonna Taylor response and the lack of ownership on the part of that police department for the violence that they perpetuated against her, which has just been really difficult on the team mentally. But I know in our communities overall, like those are the realities under which we're working and still creating and trying to be financially viable and create something that has a legacy for our families. You know, it's true what James was saying. There are amazing Black women out there. The most educated group of people in this country are Black women. And the things that, if we let them run the world, that they could do would make the world better for all of us. And so finding ways in which we're supporting people and engaging people is a lot of the work that we're undertaking at Black and Brown Founders. We're doing Chroma 2020, which is next week. It's 5 days of programming, and it's all not about the why you're doing something, but the how you're doing something. So whether it's, if you're a non-technical founder, how do you think about building a technical product? If you do want to raise VC capital, we have amazing Black and or Latinx folks that are talking about VC. You know, if you do want to design something, but you've never thought about design principles, like what do you need to do around that? So it's a lot of folks that are experts in their field. We have 50+ speakers at this point. We also have like a great legal panel, because Perkins Coie has come along and partnered with us, because legal is a thing that people need. People need access to you know, like the Paladin, who's Kristen Sunday, who's a CEO of Paladin. She says, you know, it's an access to justice issue. If you don't have legal opportunity, legal representation in all of your needs, then it is an access to justice issue. And I've taken that to heart, because it's true. Like people need access to resources that are going to enable them to be successful.
I think,
hey, Elisa.
Yeah.
I apologize. Deldelp said something there that just resonated with me so much, that every time I hear people say it, when you talk about friends and family funding, when people tell Black and brown people to go do a friend and family round, it makes my freaking head explode.
Yeah.
Like, look at the data. We don't have the money. Please stop telling them that. Just stop it.
Yeah,
Stop.
I was so going to say that you bring up social capital, but you bring up that kind of early, you know, financial capital as well, that these are the challenges. And you know, so I really wanted to, so the advice to give friends and family is bogus advice for a lot of Black and brown founders. Yeah. Like, it's just not that.
I think it's bogus advice, period, regardless of, I think it's a systemic, it's incredible to me how that's become encoded into a system that is no like, what's the oldest? Maybe 15, 20 years at the most, maybe.
Yeah.
So suddenly it's become like the rigueur thing that if I actually, like, the first time I heard that, like, I actually flew out to New York to meet with an investor. And one of the first things that I was trying to, like, get off the ground. And he said to me, if you can get your friends and family to give you $40,000, mind you, this is like 2019. So we're still in the downturn. My aunt and my uncle lost their houses. He said, if you can get your family to do this, then I like you. I think you have something, blah, blah, blah. Like, if you could, this is a great indicator for me that I can invest in you also, if the people around you are willing to invest. And I said, well, you'll never give me $1. Like, I'll get $0 from you because that will not be possible.
It's bogus. It's so bogus. It's so bogus. I saw an article this week. I didn't read it, but it just said it was Dan Gilbert's family, some young kids. You guys know about this? These guys, they built some product or company, and then they got Quicken as a client, but they're talking about how they started with nothing. I'm like, are you freaking kidding me? You woke up on third base. Like, come on, knock it off, right?
Yeah. So Lisa just put a link in the chat that I think speaks to this, right?
There are Harvard's sociology department has a really brilliant researcher, Alexandra Kilowald, who worked with Fabian Pfeffer to visually display the compound effect of wealth mobility and lack of wealth mobility in Black America in particular. And so the visual on this, you just can't, I've never seen anything more beautiful than the profound nature of exclusion that's shown there. It just, people should just stop talking about it, period. This is why it's so important to note that today's young LP, yes, institutional investors are stuck in this performance-based, racist, you'll always get what you've always gotten loop. But today's young LP believes, 88% believe that you can get both financial gains and your social values taken care of. These are the LPs who are going to pressure their family offices. In addition, today's excellent entrepreneur is insisting on a diverse venture capital group. This is important because this cognitive inclusivity, right? It's a shared belief that if you go to a group of venture capitalists who all just look like me, you're just not going to get the same level of innovation and value as you're going to get from a more diverse group. And so I think that it's maddening to hear you say this, and I think that the increasing number of people who are going to put money into the correct angel and venture capital groups who can then turn around and put money into the right diverse founding teams are the places to go. Yes, we're starting at a much smaller level than the $1 trillion level, but we have to do it.
Yeah. Well, you have to start. If we don't start there, we'll never change there at all. And I don't think the answer is to say, well, forget about them. Although, forget about VC because they'll never change or whatever. I mean, you have to start and build. And the one thing though that I think is really interesting, Deldelp, is there's a rubric you have at Black and Brown Founders, which talks about fundability versus profitability. And they are two very different things. And I know that with BlogHer, we bootstrapped for 2 years. We didn't have any friends and family money. We actually looked to generate revenue. What were the ways we could generate revenue? We famously tell the story. We put $3,000 on our credit card to rent the space for the first event, and everything after that was either barter or revenue. We generated revenue. And of course we covered our own expenses. And I also famously tell the story that I went through my whole life savings and took out $50,000 debt on my house. We all three of us did different things to get through those 2 years. But what came out on the other side was a business where Lisa, correct me if you didn't feel the same way. I felt like we had the choice. We had revenue, we had a model, we had done stuff, and we could say, do we want to keep building this, the way it is and grow it, scale it organically? And I think I have no scorn for the term lifestyle business. I think if you can build a lifestyle business that supports you and your family and some employees, that's bonus, right? So, but I think by doing that, we could say, do we want to continue building a lifestyle business, or do we really want to scale big and try to, achieve world domination? And we did choose to go to the latter, but it put us in a different position going to get funded. And we had I feel like we had more agency over deciding our path. Yeah. And so I really like this fundability versus profitability, and they're not the same thing, they're definitely not.
Yeah, and I don't dismiss people who want to go that route. I just think that there's more than, like, technology is cheaper to build than ever. Like the time that I went to New York to meet with this guy, like, mind you, like, I had a client at the time that I convinced to pay me to go to New York for something else. And I slept in like my aunt's, couch. Like I was like, it was a very cheap trip so that I could have this one meeting. And I was being very scrappy about it. And so the thing is that at that time I was trying to raise $1 million to build a prototype, because it cost $1 million to build a prototype. If I take in the same sort of concept right now and try to build it between the low code and no code and some other tech tools that exist out there, I could build something that I could test out in the market and see if there's a need and a want and a desirability to pay for it. Probably would cost me $40,000. Like that's a very different panorama. And it's been in a short 6 years in which it went from $1 million for a tech product to today. And so that's the other thing that we're thinking about is like, what is it that you want for your life? How is it that you want your life to be? And the first time I ever heard the word lifestyle business, by the way it was said to me, I didn't know what it meant because I had never heard that term. So I'm in a meeting and somebody says, well, it sounds like you have a nice mommy idea and it's like a nice lifestyle business. But the way that he said it, it was like as if he was insulting me. And I was like, oh no, it's not a lifestyle business. I had no idea what he said. I was just like, you didn't get to put that one on me.
You have to read the tone.
Yeah. But I was just like, oh.
I know Lisa and I both went at the same time unprompted.
Yeah. And mind you, this is part of the reason I'm really grateful to the two of you, is because you are an example of folks that were like, okay, what are the decisions we're going to make as entrepreneurs? What are the things that we want? What are the opportunities that we see? And not everybody has that frame of mind when they're playing a Silicon Valley game. So like you guys were very entrenched here. And mind you, I think I got that meeting after I went to that first blog, Her Entrepreneurs, through somebody there. So I was, when this person said these things to me, and I was like, oh, okay, this is not going to be as friendly as I thought it was going to be. I was shocked, but it also made me think. And over time, I've just seen so many people who do have great products, who do have traction, who do have an opportunity to do well by their customers first, meet needs that customers have, be sidetracked by playing a Silicon Valley game of trying to raise money and go from a C to a Series A to like and to play all those parts when those systems weren't built for them and weren't built considering them or considering what their needs are. And, like that's the other part that's disheartening, is that entrepreneurship is difficult enough, and Silicon Valley can't be the tail that wags the dog, because it can't be the only thing that represents entrepreneurship in this country. And specifically tech entrepreneurship in this country can be built very differently depending on where you are geographically, the people you're trying to serve, the product that you're building, the talent that's available to you. And you could have profitable companies not playing this game and still be successful. So
with our last few minutes, and thank you all for sharing all of this, the why, the different legs of the stool, as Anita Jackson in the chat mentioned about social capital being this like significant leg in a stool that you need. So if you're at that point, I do not think that Blog Her today, our Series A was only $3 million. That's not a Series A like today. And I think if it was today, it would go very differently. So starting with James and Deldelp, like where do you advise, with our last few minutes, where do you advise Black and Brown founders to get the support they need outside your own organizations? Obviously, that's obviously one place, but to where are there sources for them for the kind of transitional funding that might help them make the decisions that we made at some point. What is your best advice for a founder who's trying to get in this game, not necessarily to go straight? And I will ask Lisa to close with advice on when is someone ready? You know, what should someone think of as the point that they're ready to really get in that game and not just be completely eaten up by it. So that's sort of what I'm looking for in this last thing. Where do you tell entrepreneurs to go in your communities to pitch, to get support, to get financial capital, to broaden their social capital? What's your best quick, because we're towards the end here, and thank you guys so much for everything you've shared so far. What's your best quick advice of where to send folks? James.
Well, so I live in Atlanta, and there are a lot of resources here in Atlanta. There are places like Atlanta Tech Village, where they have communities. There's lots of organizations doing pitch competitions. There are angel groups here. You know, build something, do an MVP, see if anybody cares, figure out if somebody will pay for it, get feedback, make it better. You know, will somebody pay you for this thing? Can you do so at a productive margin where you, after you sell it, you actually make money? So figure those things out first and go from there, I would say. I mean, that's an overly simplistic answer, but you said be fast, so that's all I got.
Deldelp.
Get an accountant. Work with an accountant. If you can't afford an accountant, get yourself some accounting tools and take some classes at a community college, online, whatever is needed. Really understand where your margins are, where they're coming. Don't be scared, like create all sorts of scenarios so that you understand and you get to practice. Because I think so often we have fear around money because we don't come from money and we're afraid of losing what we do have. And so we don't make good, rational decisions. Find a lawyer that specializes in business. All lawyers by law in the United States have to do pro bono hours. If you can't afford to pay for a lawyer, ask them if you can become a pro bono client, or when is the next time that they're taking pro bono clients overall. During the summertime is a great time to get free legal stuff because there's a whole bunch of interns that come in and are doing work. But I think like those are the two things I would always say to an entrepreneur. Accounting and legal, those are amazing, amazing tools that you need to be comfortable with and not be scared of so that you can actually engage in everything from having solid contracts to having solid pricing for yourself.
Oh, that's so great. And I don't think that's advice I often hear at the get-go, but I do know that after the very first blog heard, when we sat at Lisa's kitchen table and decided to form a company, we hired a lawyer to write our LLC agreement, and we got someone else to do the books because we didn't want to be responsible for financial, the financial, we wanted to make sure it was done right. So, and I don't often hear people give that advice. So thank you very much. I think Lisa, she just texted me. I think her phone died, if that is possible. What is she saying? Her Zoom died. She's texting me her final advice. One thing she had said to me in the chat of the Zoom is that the reason she wanted me to ask you where you recommend people go to get their pitch on for these kind of seed levels and early support, other kinds of support, because VCs definitely have the privilege of being, as you said, Deldelp, in this hugely scaled game, and not necessarily looking for, they will use lifestyle business as a kind of negative. Okay, so here is what Lisa has just texted me because Zoom crapped out on her. Everything you said, plus attending pitch competitions to decide whether shooting the moon for a VC-funded business is the right choice for you or not. I always say, I have a slide in one of my decks, and read Venture Deals by Brad Feld. That's actually in my bookshelf right here. When we decided that we wanted to scale bigger than we could organically, we each got a copy of that. And of course, Lisa is the excellent journalist who actually read it and made copious notes and gave us like little handouts of all the key points from it, because that is who she is. And so I always totally have those notes still tucked into the book. And bootstrap, what'd you say? A bootstrap with great diverse co-founders, solo founders don't do as well. That is super true. That they also don't do as well when seeking funding, because investors definitely look askance at that.
Yeah, and you don't hire co-founders, you hire employees, by the way.
Yeah.
Right. So yeah, you got to find yourself. Yeah, you don't hire them, you find them. You know. And so one thing I said.
And Lisa, apologize. I got to run. I'm so sorry.
Okay, no problem.
Okay,
the last thing I'll just say is that.
Hey, Deldelp, I'll connect with you on LinkedIn. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks. I'm sorry.
And then Chris is putting a note in here about, he interviewed Lee Lefevre about his book, and that lifestyle is the subject of Big Enough by Lee Lefevre, who he interviewed last week for a webinar. And that it's totally wrong to think there's something wrong with building a business that is right-sized for what you want for your life. And I so agree with that. I give it people. The thing is, who are you going to owe? That is what I always ask people. Who do you want to owe? Who do you want to be beholden to? You can be beholden to a bank with a loan. You can be beholden to your friends and family. You can be beholden to your spouse who keeps working that full-time job while you are doing the entrepreneur thing. You can be beholden to investors. Whoever gives you money, whoever helps you do your thing, you are beholden to them. And who do you want to be beholden to? And it's something I think people don't really think through. And once you have investors, you're beholden to them, and you have a different kind of, people call it a marriage all the time, and I don't necessarily think that's true. But you have a relationship now that you have a lot of commitments to. So we're running a little over time, and we one by one peeled off. But Deldelp, thanks to James and Lisa, who said her Zoom has been crashing. Zoom. And for all their great comments, and Deldelp, thanks for yours. And please actually tell people when Chroma is and how they can sign up if they want to go.
Yeah, Chroma is, next week starts on Monday, and you can go to chroma.bbf.co and find it that way. You can also follow us on BBF Founders on all the social medias.
Great. Thank you again. And thanks to everyone for watching. Have a great weekend. Stay safe. Wear your mask. Stay distanced.
Yeah.
Register to vote.